love it. How many Christmas parties are you going to?
I'm only going to one, but I've been invited to several.
Excuse me. I've been invited to several Christmas.
Like gotta pick the best one.
It's hard to be the most popular person, isn't it? All right, cool. Well, here we are. Another great, hopefully, a good live demo training. I just wanted to make sure that everything is connected here. Yeah, we're good to go. So, a couple of things I wanted to cover today that are going to be really cool. So first, I wanted to kind of talk about the future of this great event that we're all having so much fun doing. So there's a couple formats we're going to be doing in the future, which are going to be really, really cool. So let me just share my screen here, and we can talk about this for a second here. So one of the things that APIANT is really able to do really, really well is we're able to build full-fledged turnkey integration apps that have a lot of functionality to them. And so for instance, this is MindBody-to-Zoom, and it does a ton of stuff, right? It has a lot of features, syncs Zoom meetings, emails, SMS, roll call, has bots, it has the ability to get reports and the ability to look at your bookings and send unique links, and it's all customizable and all that. And the cool thing about it is that all of that is built with our platform. So that's great, but one might ask, how do you build it, right? How do you build something so sophisticated? And you can't really teach that in 1 or 2 or 3 classes just because it's so advanced. So just to give you an example, if I go to Zoom Connect here, right, this is basically this right here, or this is Shopify Connect, but Zoom Connect right here is basically, if I look at these 3 sets of automation, is all of these automation, and each automation has a ton of functionality in it, right? It has, so this is just create and update Zoom meetings, but it has a ton of functionality, as you can see here, right? So there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, you can't even imagine building something like this in some other integration platforms. But if I zoom out here, you can see that just the create and update Zoom meeting has a lot of logic in it. So this is really kind of like the code base for just that one automation. And that whole solution has, I think it has a total of, I want to say 13 on the site and 10, so 23 automations basically comprise the functionality of this whole solution here. And so one of the things we want to do in future, oh, hi, Penelope, how are you?
Hello.
Everybody, this is Penelope. So Penelope is the nicest person anyone will ever meet. So welcome, Penelope, and we love her for that. She's also in charge of our business development. And Mark, who's here as well. So Mark is probably the second nicest person anyone will ever meet. and Mark is responsible for making sure that all our customers are happy. So what is your official title, Mark? Is it Captain of Customer Success?
Captain of Customer Success.
That's awesome. That's a cool title, man. I want a title like that. I want to be captain of something. But anyway, so the point that I'm trying to make here is in the future, what we're going to do, we're going to have series. So we're going to look at a Zoom Connect 4.0, or we're going to look at Shopify Connect, which connects Shopify and MindBody. And we have a bunch of other ones that are like that. And we're going to do a series of maybe 2 or 3 where we're going to look at parts of the functionality, and we're going to find the functionality that like, for instance, here, scale with Zoom Connect multi-sites, right? So you can connect your Zoom, your MindBody account, your multiple MindBody sites to one Zoom account. How is that done, right? How did you guys do this? Well, what we're going to do during those series on Fridays is we're going to say, okay, for instance, how do we link these accounts in, all of these accounts together into one Zoom account? And then we'll look into the automation and dissect it, basically. So instead of building something, we'll dissect a solution that's already pre-built. And I think it'll offer some different perspectives. So that's one thing we're going to do differently, or we're going to do additionally. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to take some requests, and that was actually Mark's idea, and I do love this. Pen, we still haven't told you this, and what we're going to do is we're going to have. How would you describe it, Mark? Just tell us how we're going to do it.
I think it would be just kind of a live, actual live onboarding, consulting, as we would take any client that's going to do a custom build, right? So basically, we're going to walk you through what happens in real life when we build with an actual live client.
Right. So it's a live consultation. So there's real interaction,
right,
with either a potential customer or potential user or whatever it is. I think that's a great idea because everybody gets sick of just hearing Fred talk for an hour and a half. I'm gonna drink a tea from my nice APIANT cup. Do you want to do the same, Mark? Maybe at the same time.
Yep. Let me just reach. I gotta reach real far.
People are like, wait, I thought this was training. Are you guys just gonna fool around all weekend or all Friday? Well, maybe.
Oh, hold on. I stretched all the way to the kitchen there. Hold on.
There we go. Oh, cheers.
All
right. Okay. So today, so one of the things that we're going to do today is we're going to connect. So DonorPerfect, as you know, and we've covered DonorPerfect before, it's a platform to manage your nonprofits. Excellent platform. People love it, absolutely love it. You can manage your donations, your donors, your communication with your donors, and so forth. And so we're going to connect DonorPerfect to Jotform. Now, what is Jotform? Jotform is another app that we really love, where you can build forms really easily. And they have a ton of templates for forms that are pre-built. But one of the things they have that is really quite amazing is they have these widgets that allow you to do just about anything you can think of with a form. So if I just looked at widgets here, I mean, you look at this, you can say there's a widget for everything, I mean, it's pretty wild. So those forms can be really fancy. But the other thing that they have too is they have payment options for these forms. So you can take for instance, you can take a payment, you can charge your donors with with a lot of different payment processors, not all of them, but a lot of them. So you PayPal, for instance. So what we're going to do today is we're going to say, okay, here's a form. We're going to take some donations from that form. I'm not going to connect it to PayPal. It's very easy. All you have to do is add it, but just drag and drop. But right now I'm just going to do a simple amount. We're going to take these donations, and then hopefully we'll be able to add these donations to a donor in DonorPerfect. But we're not going to do this blindly, right? So first you're going to look to see if the donor already exists. If they already exist, then we'll add the donation to that donor. If they don't exist, then we'll create the donor. And so that process, that logic of does the donor exist in DonorPerfect, all of that logic that we're going to build, we're then going to turn that into what we call a subroutine. And a subroutine is a bunch of logic that you can reuse into different automations and even across accounts. So we're going to do that. There's a lot we can do with DonorPerfect. Right now, we're probably just going to take donations, but we can do split gifts. We can process recurring donations. We can process pledges. We can process just about you know, anything that DonorPerfect allows via the API. But right now we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to take a donation. We're going to put in DonorPerfect. We're going to look for the donor. We're going to put some logic to that, and then we're going to put this into a subroutine. So let's just get started. So let me first get all set up here. So and then Mark, you know that I'm going to call on you to make sure you're paying attention.
Yep, I'm here.
That's my favorite thing to do. Putting Mark on the spot is like my absolutely favorite thing to do, just because he's such a good sport. It's true. Okay, so I'm ready to go. Okay, so here we are, DonorPerfect. The very first thing we need to do is we need to say, is there a donation? So here's the form, right? I just create a new form. I use a template, and then I publish my form. So here's my form, and I can, you know, open the form in a new tab. So here's a form, you know, first, last name. Of course, you can capture whatever you want, right? And here's my DonorPerfect. So I have both apps connected here in my connections already. So you can see DonorPerfect is connected. And I'm not going to review how to do that again, but it's pretty straightforward. Each one has its own specificity on how you connect it. So Jotform and DonorPerfect is connected. So we're going to create a new one here, and I'm going to say, what is the trigger? So what is going to trigger this automation? How are we going to start the process? And here's pretty straightforward. We're going to start the process when a form is submitted or a donation is submitted, okay? So all I have to do here is choose Jotform, new form submission, and now I get to choose my form. So I'm gonna click the drop down here, and here you can see that the form name is called Responsive Charity Donation Form. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a search for donation. So here's my form. There you go. Save. All right. So right now we have a new form submission trigger ready to go. So what are we going to do next? So we have a form. Somebody donated money. Pen or Mark, you want to volunteer? What should I do next? You just got a donation. What are you going to look for?
Well, we have the form. And so now we have to look up the client in DonorPerfect.
Exactly. So perfect. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to find the donor in DonorPerfect first. Okay. So here I could say add a app. I'm going to type DonorPerfect. And I've got a bunch of options here. So you can search a donor by different things. But right now, just to keep it simple, I'm going to say get donor by email, because I know I got an email from that form, right? I have a first, last, and an email, okay? So I'm gonna say get donor by email, okay? And I'm going to map the email here. So I can map it right from here.
Right.
Or again, I could just click the select diagram, move my mouse over, and then choose the email, okay? And then what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna say continue if non-critical error, because we may not have a donor, okay? All right, so we have a donor. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to check to see if we found a donor with that email, okay? So I'm gonna add a conditional here. And I'm gonna say, click here. I'm going to select the diagram. And then here, I'm gonna say, do I have a donor ID, right? So I'll move to donor ID. If the donor ID is not empty, it means a donor ID was returned when I looked for that donor by email.
Right.
Now I can rename this here, found donor. Okay.
Right.
Look for a donor, found donor. If I did not find a donor, I'm going to want to add the donor.
Correct.
So I'm going to go to the left, and here I'm going to choose DonorPerfect. Add a donor. fetch fields. Now let's read this before we move too fast here. All this stuff here has some good information. This says add donor, adds a new donor, pretty straightforward, okay? Using your connected default DonorPerfect account. If I had connected multiple accounts, then I would have multiple, but look at what this says here. Allow duplicate emails. If checked, the new donor will be created even if the email exists for a different donor account. If not checked, a new donor will not be created in the email if the email already exists, okay? So if I check this, right, it would allow me to create a new donor with the same email, okay? In this particular case, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Now, in my case, and I'm just going to click save here. In my case, I know this is a unique email because the reason I ended up here is because I couldn't find it by that email.
Right.
Right. But there are other cases where you may want to add donor and you may want to duplicate an email, maybe a whole family and people all use the same email. Okay. All right. So let's match some stuff. I'm going to match the email here. So the email is coming from the donation form. I'm going to match the first name. And where's the first name? No first name. What is on the form? Full name, first name, last name. Ooh, okay. I should have checked that. No first name. Let's see why that is. Let's do a refresh. Possible that that form, for some reason, is not emitting the first name. Huh, no first name. Okay. All right. So that is something you would reach out to APIANT and say, hey, I'm not seeing a first name in my form. Why is that? So what I suspect, and I'm not positive on that, let me see. Oh, it's using a name field and somehow it's not parsing it. So let's change the form. So I'm going to come back here, and instead of using this pre-built, this might be a new one that they've added. And again, Jotform adds, you know, widgets and code snippets so often. I'm surprised this one is not showing up as first and last name, but we could fix it. I'm not going to fix it now because that would take too much time to show you how to edit that in the to do that in the assembly editor. But what I'm going to do though is I'm going to replace this with a short text first name. Oops. And a short text last name. And I can't type today for some reason. All right, first name. If Robert was here, he could have fixed it on the fly, but he's not here. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this one here. And I'm going to publish this. Do a refresh. I got a new first and last name. And I'm going to submit that. Let's see. It's not letting me submit. What did I do? Did I screw up the first and last name? Hold on. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's call it full name or just name. And I'll show you how we can parse a name. Okay, publish that. We'll get there. Okay, so Fred Lumiere is my name. Let's just call it test1@apiant.com. And 310-210 amount 100. Again, this is a very simple, hi, this is Fred. This is a very simple form, and obviously they can be a lot better than that. I'm just going to submit this. I'm going to save. Okay, let's just save it. Okay. So here I'm going to sort by ID to see this thing that I was working on. And let's see if we can refresh this. Actually, reselected is probably the best thing. So since I changed the form, what was it called again? Donation. Okay. And here's the name. Okay. So the name here, I need a first and last name, but I only have a name field. So we need to parse that name field. So let's do that first. So we're going to interrupt, we're going to go a little higher here. We're going to add an action here. And this is going to be a transform data action. And we're going to transform text. And we're going to parse or extract person name components. Now, you probably wouldn't know how to do that because if you don't know it exists, you can't find, you don't know about it, right? So one of the ways to find it is you would just come here and say, find an action and type name. And here you can see all the actions that have the word name in it, okay? And then as you scroll down, you should be able to find extract person name component, okay? So if you remember the word component, maybe you could have typed component, but I just typed name, and that's how you can actually find it. You can actually search for these actions if you don't know where to find them, okay? This will search every action, and then the other one, yeah, this will search every action from every app that's on the system. So, you know, refine your search with something pretty specific, okay? All right, so how do I split out that name? Well, it's very simple. I just come here, and I just pick the name, and this will emit a first, middle, and the last name magically, okay? So now I can come here and add donor, and I can take the first name from here, the last name from here, and why not even a middle name from here. Let's save this. I like to save every so often, just in case the internet, the interweb breaks down. And here's just added. And I also like it because I have different stages and I can tell on each version what I've done. So added name splitting action. Okay. Okay, so we've got an email, first name and last name. And what else did we ask in this form? Did we ask for anything else? An amount and a message. But you could have added, obviously, address, phone number. Oh, there's a phone number. Sorry, I missed the phone number. Ooh, let me show you something else we can do with phone numbers that's really cool. So, well, actually, you could have asked, we could have asked the country, which we didn't. Okay, we'll assume everybody's in the US right now, but you can also ask the country. But the reason I like that is I like to reformat the phone number is because it's nice to be able to format the phone number so systems can dial automatically. So how do you do that? Well, here I'm going to add another action. And okay, I don't remember where it is. Okay, I do remember, but find action. I'm just going to type phone. And here is parse phone number, okay? And if you don't know what it does, just read it. Transforms text, parse phone number. Parses the first phone number found in input text, emits the number in E164 international format plus in the country's national format. E164 is that international format that you can use. So if you're adding this to Salesforce or to another CRM and you have an auto dialer, it's good to clean up the phone number to make sure that it's in the right format. So I'm going to do that. The text that we're getting is the phone number, right? So I'm going to come here and put phone. Oh, same with phone. It's the same thing with the phone. All right, I'm going to skip the phone part. Just for some reason, this form is not recognizing the phone field. We can support it, but right now we just have to put a, because this is a snippet in Jotform that probably does some data cleansing or some data verification to make sure it's a proper phone number and proper area code and all. So I'm just going to skip the phone number for now, but we could, and if we have more time, I'll show you how to do it. But I'm just going to skip the phone number because I really want to get to these subroutines. Okay, so we extract the name. We get the donor by email. If we didn't find the donor, we add the donor. If we found the donor, what do we do?
Maybe we want to update fields in DonorPerfect.
Right. We want to add a donation in DonorPerfect with that donation. So in DonorPerfect, there's a gift. Okay, so we want to add a gift here for that donor that we found. Okay, so we could do this here, or we could do this here. We could do it both ways, both places, or we could do it on the bottom here, because if we're going to add a gift, regardless if we create a donor or not, we may as well add it just once instead of adding it twice. Okay, but if I'm going to add it here, I'm going to add it here, and you'll see what I'm missing, and then we'll add it. So here, I'm just going to come here and say DonorPerfect, add gift. And we're going to choose add a donor. What'd you call again? Add a gift. Add a donor gift. Add a new donor gift by email, or add a new donor gift. I'm just going to say add a new donor gift. I'll tell you why I'm going to do this as opposed to an email. This one needs a donor ID. So I'm going to just save it, and it's going to give me a little red thing and say, hey, I'm missing a required field here. The reason I'm adding it as a donor gift using a donor ID as opposed to add donor gift by email is because you want to give, in this particular case, you want to give yourself a lot of flexibility and say, hey, if some reason I allow multiple emails, right? Or multiple donors with an email, and I want to refine my search based on first and last name, for example, then I want to be able to add a gift to that donor that I found, as opposed to adding it to the donor, the first donor I find with that email. Okay, so that's why I want to do this. Here I need a donor ID. So I could theoretically grab the donor ID from here and then from here and map both of them into this one field. I don't like to do that. It's just not as pretty when you map two fields into one. What I like to do is I like to save the donor ID that I found and then retrieve it. It gives me a lot more flexibility in the future to add a lot more logic for my donor search. And at the end of that logic, I just emit a donor ID, okay? As opposed to having 5 different possibilities and mapping the donor ID of each possibility into this one field. So I guess what I mean by this is I could come here and say, okay, we're going to use this for the donor ID, and we're going to use this for the donor ID, right? That's fine, but honestly, it's not elegant, and it's not flexible for expanding your integration. So what I like to do instead, Okay, I'm going to save here. I'm going to say add lookup. So the lookup action has a bunch of save. This is how you save data in the database and retrieve data, okay, in different fashions. I'm going to say save value here. I'm going to say this is the scope is only for this automation, okay, and I'm going to say the key group. I'm going to create a key group. The key group is a table in the database where you want to save that. Here I'm going to say, Jotform underscore donor perfect. So that's the key group. What is the key, right? The key in this particular, the key is something that's unique to that particular execution. The key that I'm going to choose here is going to be to be able to assign a donor ID. It's going to be the form submission. So here I can say the not the form ID, because the form ID is going to be repeated. It's always the same form. It's the ID of the submission. Okay. So here I'm going to say submission. So jot form submission ID. It's always a good idea to really be very literal at every step that you can. You can try to move fast and just put the submission ID in here and not describe it, or just say ID is. But anytime you do that, you really start making it very difficult for you to expand and build those incredible automations that are really sophisticated. If you're very specific as to what it is that you are doing, and then you use the same format, for instance, I never use spaces in keys. I only have lowercase after the first letter, unless it's an app, okay? Then as you expand your automations and your integrations, you can guess what the name of a key is, because you know this is between Jotform and DonorPerfect, and then you know this is a Jotform submission ID. So it's Jotform underscore submission underscore ID underscore, and then the submission ID. Okay, it's a good idea to stick to your plan, basically to stick to your nomenclature. Okay, so what are we storing here? We're storing a DonorPerfect donor ID. That's the value name, and the value in this particular case, if we got to this part, the ID is from here. Okay, so that's the donor ID here. Okay, and right, and that's it. Okay, so save. And here for the value, again, I'm showing you how I do it. Everybody's free to do it the way they want, but I'm showing you how it's been successful for me. Okay, so as far as what I like to do too is, so it's visually easy to understand what each thing does, I just copy the value name here and I save it here. So then I know exactly what this action is doing. Okay. Then you can also do searches on your, here you can search your whole automation for an action name. You can search for action settings or field mappings and so forth. Okay. All right. So then I'm going to copy that and I'm going to do the same thing. So remember, this is storing this donor. And then I'm going to add one here, which is going to store this donor, because this donor ID is going to be different than this one. But first of all, if we get to here, there is no donor ID here, right? So I'm going to paste that here. And I'm just going to replace the donor ID here. Okay. So now what I've done is I have two actions here: save DonorPerfect donor ID, save DonorPerfect donor ID. So no matter which branch of that tree, of that conditional it took, it's going to have a different donor ID. And then you normalize it. Basically, you just say here, I'm going to retrieve the donor ID. So whatever I saved in database will be retrieved. So here I'm going to say get value. You've seen me do this many times before. I don't fill any of that up. I just save it. I copy this. I copy the field mappings, okay? And then I paste the field mappings. Now, Mark was about to say, I think this is why he turned on his video, hey, Frederick, you made a mistake. You forgot something. What did I forget? Mark.
So you copied the field mappings. You're gonna have to rename.
Why is this going to break?
Oh,
Pen, we need to get a sound. What is the jingle of?
Do, 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 do,
Okay,
do.
Mark. Why is this going to break? Why is it going to break?
because the information coming down. Oh, because you're only getting fields from one side of the condition. You copied from the right side, but does that necessarily match what's coming through the left side?
All right, you weren't paying attention. I replaced the mapping here.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't replace the mapping. No, it's okay.
Right.
The reason it's going to break is because I copied this into this, which was fine. But then I added that manually, and then I copied the fields, which is fine. But look at the difference. Scope, this automation,
Right.
and then the scope here is my account.
Oh, right. So it's not going to find it because it's not in the.
Right. So what it is that by default, when you add an action, a save action, a store action, it uses my account as a scope, right? And we covered that in previous demos.
Right.
I want to make sure the scope matches the scope of where I save it. And basically the scope, just to go real quick, this automation means it stores the data just for this automation to retrieve it. My account means it stores the data for any automation in your account to retrieve it. Linked accounts, it stores the data for any accounts on the APIANT platforms that are linked or in a dedicated APIANT server. And then the tenant is it stores the data for the whole system, the whole box, the whole APIANT.com, or so APIANT users or APIANT customers would not have access to this. But if you had a dedicated version of the APIANT platform, you would have access to this, okay? So that's just storing it in a different place that it's accessible. Okay, all right, so we're good. So now when we add the donor by gift, we can actually map just one field. We just map the output of this, oops, of this right here, but this is not a save, it's a retrieve. I think I misnamed it, or did I get a bad one? Yeah, get value. So it's not a save. I mislabeled it because I copied and paste, so it's get. Okay, because here we save, and here we get. All right, so we add a donor gift. All right, we got to put a gift date. We could convert the date from the form. Is there a date here? Updated at? Yes, we could convert this to the DonorPerfect format, or we could just put today's date since, you know, it's going to be the same one since we know this. So how do you do this? You just come to the bottom here and you say system value, current date, and then you want to do the right format. Now I remember, or I know that the format for the date for DonorPerfect is 1, 2, 3, 4 year, and then month, 1, 2, and then day. Okay, and the amount is going to be the amount from the trigger. So what do we call it? Amount right here. And then everything is, you know, GL code. I mean, we've done integrations with forms like Jotforms or Gravity forms and DonorPerfect that are so sophisticated, where depending on what they donate on one form, it splits it, and it has different GL code, different QuickBooks code, different solicit code, different campaigns, and so forth. So there's a lot you can do. But right now we're keeping it simple. We're just putting in an amount. And I think what we could also add though is, I think we can put notes in there. Adjust notes or description, narrative. I think it's called narrative. Yes, gift narrative. So what we can do is we can add the notes from the form. Remember, this form had a notes here into the gift narrative, and I'll show you where this shows up. So if you want to see what you've mapped, here it is. We have donor ID, gift date, amount, gift narrative, save. We should be ready for an initial test here. I'm going to say save, finished. Remember the versions, right? So I can come here, see all the versions of that I saved, and I can revert back to one. So if I want to go back to added name splitting action, this is what it looked like. And I can save this and it'll override it, okay? But that's not the version we have. So let me just create a folder here, demo, Jotform, APO for DonorPerfect, and I'm going to move this here so it doesn't clear our screen here. That's all we look at, okay? So I'm going to turn this on. So something that's important to say, when you create an automation, if the automation trigger is not a webhook, okay, so the difference between a webhook, do you want to explain the difference between a webhook and a fetching trigger, Mark or Penn, whoever's willing?
Sure. So the webhook is an instant, what we call an instant trigger. So as soon as that action or that thing happens, so as soon as the form is submitted, it would immediately pick up that submission if it was a webhook. If it's not a webhook, it's basically, in a sense, storing that data, waiting for somebody to call it. In this case, this particular trigger, because it came up with a timer, is not a webhook, because otherwise it would say an instant. And so we're going to call for this information at a certain time. And in this case, 5 minutes and 33 seconds from now, it's going to call that information.
Exactly. So it's push versus pull. So
Gotcha.
A webhook is push, and a fetch automation is pull. We go fetch the information. So the reason I mention this is if it's not a webhook, when you turn your automation on the first time, okay, it has to run once before it processes any information. Because what it's doing is that it's looking at all of the data that it finds, and then it says to itself, okay, this is what I found. I'm going to remember this. If anything changes according to those parameters in the future, then I will process it. So one of the common mistakes that I see people make is that they turn on their automation, they run and say, hey, I didn't see my data, didn't come through. The very first time it runs, it's not going to process any data. It's going to take a snapshot of what it found. And then it's only after that that that'll happen. Now, when you turn it on the first time, it does that, okay? Okay, so let's submit one. So we'll call, let's see, let's do one where there is a donor. So we're gonna go to Sydney here. So Sydney James, here's her email. So let's put this, I like to stay organized. So here it is. So here she is, and then the automation is gonna be right here, and I'll close this here. Okay, so Sydney James, here is her, and I'll put a phone number in there. All right, so she's donating $200, and she wants to say, in honor of Mark Captain, oh my Captain. All right, so here's a donation. This is gonna run in 3 minutes, or we can run it manually. Let's see what happens.
Oh,
all right, so it worked. So let's see what it did. I click on it again here. Let's see what happened. So we got a donation. If I move my mouse on here, you can see all the details of the donation. Captain of my Captain. Extracts names and components. Sydney James, first name Sydney, last name James. Get donor by email. It found the donor, okay, and it emitted a donor ID. Here it said, okay, do I have a donor ID? Yes, it's not empty. Therefore, I'm saving the donor ID for this submission. Okay. I'm going to retrieve the donor ID. Here's my donor ID 1017. I'm going to add a gift to DonorPerfect. So $200, gift date, no gift narrative.
Oh, so we have to see what was that called.
Oh, it's a message.
Uh-huh.
It's not a note. It's not in notes, it's in message. It came through as message. So I'll have to fix that. So, all right, so let's see the gift. So here I should be able to do a refresh. Here's the gift. It's so satisfying when you see this stuff work. You know, you look at it, you're, oh, that's so cool. I never have to enter a gift manually ever again, rest of my life. So here's the today's date, $200. And that's about it. Really, that's all we really have in there. Now, you know, it could be a lot more sophisticated, but this is what we have so far. But we didn't have a narrative, which I think is in gift memo. So let's try to map that. So it came from message, not from notes. So here, let's see. So it wasn't notes, it was message right here. All right, we're gonna do a second donation. Here I'm gonna say fixed mapping of narrative. All right, let's do it again. She's now going to donate. Remember I said the nicest person, the second nicest is you, but the nicest is Penn. So she's gonna give Penn $300 in honor of Penelope.
Nice.
Nice. And then this one is gonna be You're Simply the Best. I have a soundtrack in my mind as I'm writing this. Okay, done. So let's see here. Oh, it's running 14 minutes. So let's say we didn't run it manually. This would happen. We can just monitor it. Should be a few seconds.
It says at the top too.
There you go. On its own. And now we have a second gift for $300. And this one says, in honor of Penelope, you're simply the best. Ooh, so this is not cleaning up so we have space and the apostrophe being, you know, all messed up. We can fix that. I'm not going to do it right now, but basically what it would be an action above that cleans it up in regular text. It converts HTML to regular text or maybe JavaScript, but no biggie, it's doable. But I really want to get into subroutines and I don't want to run out of time. I have a tendency to linger. So, okay, so that's that. Does it make sense so far?
Okay.
Okay, so what we wanted to do is say, let's say finding out what the donor ID is something we want to do as a subroutine. And why would you want to do a subroutine? You'd want to do a subroutine when you want to be able to reuse that logic in many other automations. Okay, so finding out if the donor is found and expanding on the logic of finding out if a donor or which donor to add a gift to or a pledge to is something that really lends itself to being a subroutine because it's a pretty typical thing you'd want to do with DonorPerfect. So how do you do it? Well, we have this secret door here on the left. You see this little thing right here? Did you know that was there, Penn?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know? That's the subroutine. Ooh, look at this subroutine.
Oh, magical.
Look at it, it's magical. So this is where you put your subroutines. So you have community subroutines, you have my subroutines, okay? What we're gonna do is we're gonna create a subroutine. So before I create a subroutine, I know what I want in that subroutine. I want at least this, if not more, right? I'm gonna want get donor by email, found donor, yes, no, do this, and then I'm gonna want this here. So select this and all following, and I'm gonna want this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and I think, and that's it. And then I'm gonna deselect this. So now I've selected these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actions. I'm going to copy the selected items, okay? And then I'm gonna create a subroutine. Create a subroutine. Okay, when you create a subroutine, you have an input and then you have an output. So what is the input? The input is what do you give the subroutine for it to process what it needs to process? And the output is what does the subroutine return? What does it send back to the automation that called the subroutine? Does it make sense, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. So what are we going to give the subroutine? So here we're going to, sorry, I didn't want to click this. Input fields. What are going to be the fields that we want to give the subroutine? What can you think of?
The name.
Remember, we're replacing that all these actions and we're putting them into a subroutine. So email for sure.
Yeah, email, name.
Okay, so I'm going to say email.
Yes, we have email. Basically, what's on the form, right? So email, name.
Not all of it, just what you need for the subroutine.
Okay.
Just what you need to go find if this is a donor. Now, I know that email for sure because we're going to find by email.
Right.
Okay. But also, I may find by email plus first and last name if there are multiple members in the family, right? So email first and then last. Okay. So these will be what I send to the subroutine. Okay. And now this action is going to emit a first, a last, and an email. What do we get back from the subroutine? Well, ultimately, we're going to get back a donor ID. We want the subroutine to figure out which donor is this for, okay? Does it make sense, Ben?
Yes, making sense.
So here I say output field, and here I'm going to say donor ID. Okay, and again, always underscore. I like to do that, my personal choice. So I'm going to have to map a donor ID in here, which I don't have yet. Now, what do we do in between the input and the output? Well, what we're going to do for sure is we're going to paste the items that we copied from the other automation, right? For sure, we're going to say get donor by email. We're going to check this, and then we can always make it, more sophisticated. So where am I going to get this donor email here?
From the subroutine.
From the subroutine. Perfect. Okay. Moving down. Save donor ID. So this is all mapped. If you wonder where stuff are mapped from, oh, I also need a Jotform submission ID. Because remember, this is something that I need to get from the subroutine because I can't go get it from the automation. So the subroutine has to send it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So submission input, the submission ID also needs to come from the subroutine. So here I'm going to add submission ID. Okay. The subroutine, it's a little bit like you ask your kid to go grocery shopping. Okay. What do you give your kid and what do you hope to get in return? Right? So you give your kid a list of all the stuff he or she has to go buy at the grocery store. And what you hope to get in return is you hope to get what the kid has purchased, right? And hopefully some change. But most likely you won't get your change. Just fine. But that's what it is. You give something for someone to do, and then they're going to return something. That's what the subroutine is, okay? So the subroutine cannot perform its task without a submission ID because it needs a submission ID for the step where it stores the DonorPerfect ID here, right? So here now I'm going to be able to remap this to the submission ID. Yeah, so when you add that after sometime, it's okay. Well, this is I'll have to refresh and we'll be fine. But let me just finish this here. So get donor by email, add donor here. So everything is good.
So you have
First
to,
name, last name, middle name. Okay, so we're gonna put the email from the subroutine. And we're gonna put the first name from the subroutine and then the last name from the subroutine. Now let me refresh, and I think I might have forgotten to refresh for the submission ID. Save. Sometimes you have to close and reopen it, so. Yeah, you have to close and reopen it. So we'll do that after, no problem. So I'll take this out for now. Okay, and I'll take this out for now. All right, so what do you expect to return to the automation that called the subroutine? And it's the donor ID. Okay, so here I'm going to take the donor ID from that last action. So here I'm going to have to refresh here as well. So I'll just put donor ID in there so I can save it. Okay, and I'm going to save the subroutine. Here I need to put, what am I missing? Okay, so email first, last. This is still in beta, so we have to, let me see, I just want to be able to say, okay, so here's the name and then description. So here is going to be evaluate, or you can call it whatever you want. Evaluate donor perfect donor, or find or match, or add or match, add or match donor perfect donor. Description will evaluate which donor to return from donor perfect. I don't want it to be public. I just want it to be for myself. Okay, so I'm just going to save that. Okay, so here's a subroutine. I'm going to delete all of this right here now because it's in the subroutine. So those don't need to be here anymore. Okay, what I need to do is I need to run the subroutine. So I'm going to delete those. And I'm going to save that. Removed actions not needed using subroutine. Okay. Let's look at that subroutine again. Let's do a refresh. And here's a submission ID now. There's a little bug where you have to save it and then reopen it in order to see all these new fields if you add fields after you do the first refresh. So we'll fix that, but all you have to do is save it, close it, reopen it, and then everything shows up. Here, we're going to use a submission ID from the subroutine. You're following me here. Am I going too fast, or does this make sense?
you know, you're good.
Okay.
No, yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Just let me know if you don't, if I'm speeding up too much. Okay, so now we're gonna get the email from the subroutine. We're gonna get the first name from the subroutine. We're gonna get the last name from the subroutine, and that's all we get right now. And what else? And then this is already done. Oh, the donor ID needs to come from that last step. Oh, yeah, I missed a point here. I missed a section. So we need to retrieve the donor ID. So the other donor ID that I had needs to be here as well. So I'm going to do this again here. So I'm going to say add lookup. Okay, mark. Make sure that I don't forget anything. Get value, right? Save. Copy field mappings.
Correct.
Paste field mappings. Rename. Get DonorPerfect donor ID.
Correct.
What did I miss?
The scope.
Ah, see, that's the thing about the guy. He never forgets. Just never forgets. Okay, that's awesome. Very good. Okay, and now I can map the output of that into the donor ID here. Okay, that makes sense?
Yes.
So basically, we've replicated what we were doing before in the other automation, but now we're doing it in a subroutine. And the advantage of the subroutine, again, is that you can reuse it in many other automations, okay? So I'm gonna save that. So now how do you call a subroutine? So here, fix mapping. How do you call a subroutine? It's actually pretty straightforward.
There's got to be an action, right?
Exactly. So we're gonna wanna do it here, right? So here we get the trigger, we split the name, right? So this is where we want to get the subroutine. This is where we want to decide what donor is for, right? So find action. I'm going to type subroute right here. Execute subroutine.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then here it says which subroutine. It's the only subroutine that I have.
Right.
Fetch data fields. And look at that.
Now you don't have to map anything here, right?
Well, yeah, I have to give I'm telling the subroutine what the data is. Now I'm doing it on the other side, right?
That's
so the email is the email. Okay. The first name, remember, is from the extract person.
Oh, I think the light bulb just went off.
That's it. Hey, we need to have a sound for the light bulb going off.
It's like a puzzle. It's like a, even though I'm a nerd and I can talk most nerdese, for some reason that subroutine, I was just thinking, well, it's like a loop, but really it's like a template. It's just like a box of templates, so to speak, that you have that it just functions that you're going to reuse in the future, so you don't have to constantly rebuild them. So basically like snippet or a widget or something like that, where you're just dropping it in, but you have to say, hey, these fields are going to go to this widget. So yeah,
and don't forget it returns something,
right?
So it's like a bot. It's a bot that's going to go do something and return something.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what, and you can put anything you want in that subroutine, which is really cool, because the subroutine can be incredible logic, right? So how am I going to get the donor ID in here, though?
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Is there another? There's got to be a result of the subroutine, right? So can you map? Are you mapping to above?
Yeah. So the light bulb did go off. Okay. So well, here I don't need to do anything because it's getting it from.
Oh, the subroutine saved it to that in the database, right.
But you're right that the subroutine, if I move on top of subroutine, it emits the donor ID. Because remember when we went into the subroutine, we say send the donor ID as a result. But you could have sent a lot more, right? Right. So the subroutine, when you let me just save that so I don't lose the work. Added execute subroutine. Right. So if you look at that again here, you see that subroutine at the end of it, subroutine output. So you can output whatever you want. You can output a lot more than just donor ID. We could output a ton of stuff, right, that we found.
Right.
The subroutine could go to multiple apps and come back with one list. Here's your Salesforce ID. Here's the QuickBooks invoice. And maybe the subroutine does all these things and comes back and just gives you links and URLs and IDs and whatever you want, right? That's the power here. It's really, really powerful stuff. So, okay, so in this case, all we have to do to retrieve the donor ID is get it from database, because now I just thought of something. The subroutine is a different automation. So the scope, this automation is not going to work here. So we don't want to use this. So what we want to use, we actually don't need this. We can actually remove this, right? I'm going to remove the field mapping, and I'm going to map the donor ID right from the subroutine. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
You sure?
Well, yeah, because it's stored right there.
Right. No, because the subroutine is returning it. Why do I have to go get it from the database?
Right.
Plus, this would have worked, but the scope, remember, we chose automation scope, which is storing the data just for that automation, where the subroutine is technically a different automation.
Right.
So you would have to do scope account. But we don't need to do it here because the subroutine is going to return the donor ID anyway. So, okay. Right, I think we got it. So let's run it and test it. You know what I'd like to do too is, instead of execute subroutine, I'm going to give it the name of the subroutine. I forgot what the name was.
It's in the, you gotta do your little hide box.
So name execute subroutine, just so you see it, you know, at least you don't have to open and see what's selected. Add or match DonorPerfect donor. Okay. All right, so save. Let's run it. Mapped output of subroutine to DPO action, add new donor gift. Let's see how it works. We probably screwed something up, just so you know, but
Never.
all right, Sydney. Well, let's go to somebody else but Sydney. Let's go to somebody new. Okay. So we're gonna say, who could donate some money to our cause? Who do you want to donate money to our cause? How about, do you have anybody in mind? Bill Gates?
Sure, Bill Gates.
All right. So Bill Gates. All right, let's just say Billy Bob, that's his nickname. And put a different phone number. He's gonna give us
$1 million.
$1 million. How come I knew you were gonna say that? It's so funny. Oh my God, you're funny. And this one is gonna be because you deserve it. All right, let's see what happens. $1 million. Where does this come from, by the way? I don't know.
Austin Powers.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Dr. Evil.
That's right. All right, so let's see what happened here. So it came here. It got a submission from Billy Bob, and it extracted the name. So Bill Gates. It executed the subroutine, and then it outputted a donor ID. And then it added the gift to that donor. So the cool thing about the subroutines is you can actually click into the subroutine, and it opens another window that shows you the execution of that subroutine. How cool is this? So here, the subroutine got email, first name, last name, and submission ID. Then it moved down here and says get donor by email. Could not find billybob@apiant.com, therefore added the donor billybob@apiant.com. Save that temporarily under that submission ID with a donor ID 1018. And then it got 1018 and then added that to the output of the subroutine. So when we came out of the subroutine, we had that donor ID that it just added.
Right.
And then we added the gift using this 1018. So
Right.
if I go to DonorPerfect and I replace, let me just go to Sydney here. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Oh, I logged out of DonorPerfect. Great job, Fred. All right. You want to know why I'm crazy? Because of this. Look at all my tabs. People see that, they always go, oh, no wonder you're insane. All right. Let me, all right. I use LastPass. I have something like 2,000 passwords, so highly recommend it. Okay, so Sydney James here. I'm going to replace the donor ID with 1018, and that's going to be Bill Gates, Billy Bob, gift, $1 million because you deserve it.
Yay.
Make sense?
Yep. Send the check.
All right, it's 2:13. How much more? Do we have another 20 minutes, Pen?
Yeah, around 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, do we have any questions so far?
Let me check. Nope, no questions so far on the chat. No questions from me either.
Okay, and if you're watching this and you want to be able to ask questions, you'll need to register on the Zoom webinar, because if you're just watching the live stream, you can't really, we're not monitoring the channels. So you have to register as a participant into the webinar in order to be able to ask questions. Here's what I would like to do. I'm going to do a new donation, but this time it's going to be for Billy Bob's wife, who wants to use the same email, but wants to be a different donor. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, here comes the subroutine. So let's go to our subroutine. Okay, so here it is. And right now we're saying, okay, get donor by email. If we find it, then go ahead and add the donor. So this is the first donor by email. But what if there are two donors with that same email, right? So how do we do that? So instead of found donor, what I'm going to do here is rename this and call this found unique donor. Okay, because if there's more than one emails, it's going to give us an error. Okay, so here I'm going to say continue if there's an error. It's going to come up with it's going to give us an error, and the error is going to say I found more than one donor with that email. Okay, so how do we check now, and what do we do if there's more than one donor? Well, we're going to create a second. So we go to the right if there's only one. Now we're going to create a second conditional here, and we're going to look at something different here. We're going to look at the output of that action's error message. Okay, here I'm going to say if the error message contains the word multiple, and I just know this, and you could do tests to see what kind of errors you get if you get more than one donors, okay? But I know this. If it gets multiple, then it means it found more than one donors with that email, Okay, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this and say this is found multiple donors with the same email in DonorPerfect. All right, so what do you do if you find more than one donors with the same email? Well, you could do a second search. And at that point here, I could just say DonorPerfect. Okay. And here it's get donor by email, first name and last name. So now we're trying to make a match on the email, the first name and the last name. Now remember, we have this from the subroutine. So here the email is this. The first name is that. Pan, does this make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So now I'm adding this thing called get donor by email, first name and last name. I'm going to say continue if error. And here I'm going to do a conditional branch. And I'm going to look for the output of this and look for a donor ID. Same thing here. If only one is found, it's not going to give me an error. It's just going to give me the donor ID. So it's not empty. All right. And here we're going to say found donor using first plus last plus email. Okay. If we find it, then all we have to do at this point is copy paste this save donor by ID and take the output of that new donor ID, or of that newly found donor ID. Okay, does it make sense? It's pretty straightforward. So you don't have to do anything else. All this subroutine does is that it returns a donor ID. We will add the gift later. Okay, and this is where, again, you can see the power. You don't have to add the gift here and add the gift here and add the gift here. The subroutine does one thing. It finds the donor ID, at least this particular one. If we haven't found the donor by first and last, and then you can choose what you want to do at this point. So I'm going to show you another example of this that's already built out, because I don't have the time to build it all out, but just to show you some pretty typical logic that I've used before for, this is not a subroutine, and this is with gravity form. So here we convert some state and stuff information, but here you can see get donor by email. Okay, if I found the donor, I can actually check, has the donor's address changed? So are they changing their address on the form, right? Is it different than the address they had in DonorPerfect? Here, if it's the same address, I just save it. But if it's not the same address, you can actually, in this particular case, what we're doing here is we're using the addresses here. We're backing up the old address and replacing the new address. So if people move, you never lose track of what was there before. So this is what we're doing here. And you can see it gets pretty sophisticated. Now, if we found a donor, we check to make sure the address has not changed. If it has changed, we say add new address. And the add new address, by the way, is just an action called add new address. Okay. And here we put the new address. What happens if there's more than one? Found multiple. If there's more than one, we get the donor by email, first name and last name. Okay. If we found the donor first name and last name, we do the same thing. We check to see if the address has changed. If it hasn't changed, we just add the donor ID. If not, we back up the address and then we get the donor ID. So this is kind of what we did here without this piece. But the reason I'm showing you this is because I was wondering, what do we do if we cannot find, we found multiple donors with that same email, but we haven't found one with an exact match with first and last first and last name. So some options. What we do here, if we found multiple donors with the same email first and last name, we just add the donor here. And I think what we are doing is we add the donor. Yeah, I think we add the donor, adds a new donor based on email, and we allow duplicate emails. Okay, so we add a new donor in this case because we found multiple, so we don't know which one it is. And here what we do is actually we send an email. We send an email, oh, I don't have it connected, but we send an email to the admin that says, hey, this person just donated, but we found multiple people with his first and last name and that email. So why don't you merge them first and then retry it? You could also do this through human interaction that we showed last week, where you could send an SMS and say, or an email or a Slack message or whatever you want. And then you could say, hey, I found multiple donors. Here they all are. Here's the donor IDs. Here are the first name, the last name, and the email. Here's the address. Would you like to merge them all? Yes, boom, we merge them. Or would you like to handle it? Yes, go ahead and handle it, right? So there's a lot of options as to what you do next. It's really up to you with your business processes on how you want to handle these findings, okay? And then if none are found here, we just add it, okay? So I just wanted to show you this because I don't have the time to build all of this, but there's a lot of things that you can do with that kind of logic. In our case, we're going to say if we found it with a first and last name, we just go ahead and save it. If we don't find it, we're going to add the donor. So I'm going to move this up here, okay, because I don't want to add a donor twice. So I'm going to move this. So you can see you can move these actions. I'm going to move it to the false branch. So it goes, you see it went from here, boom, and it moved here. So if I found multiple donors with the same email, I go here. If I find a donor with the first and last name and email, I go here. And if I don't find it, let's say I just want to add it. So I'll add a third one because I don't know which one it is. Maybe it's a third person in the family, you know? Okay. And everything is pre-mapped, so we're good to go here. Okay. And I also want to save this new donor I just created here. I'm going to save the donor ID. Okay, so a quick recap. Get donor by email, found it, boom, save the donor ID. Did not find it or found multiple. Did I find multiple? No, I did not find multiple. Therefore, I just added. It means that we didn't find it. I found multiple with that email. Can I find the one with the first and last name and the email? Is there only one? Yes, save that donor ID. No, I'm going to add a third person now, or a fourth or a fifth, because there is no match with first and last name. Okay, and I save the donor ID. Donor ID is retrieved. Oh, I also have to move this. Mark, take a look at this. I have to move this up here because now so I move this to the false branch as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Okay, so you really want to make sure that those actions make sense to where they are. And if you want to make sure that this is still mapped to this, you can either go like this and say find items mapped to this, and it selects it. Okay, or you can reverse it. You can actually come here and you can say, all right, where is this taking this donor ID from? See that little eye here? You can actually click on the eye and it shows you here. But if you want to see in a diagram, you double click on it. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so I think we're good now to handle Billy Bob's wife. So I'm going to save this. Add in, enhance, donor search. Okay, let's go in here and let's look for Bill Gates. I'm going to use the same email. I think I can actually just add a donor right in here, add new individual, Melinda. This might have been a bad example, by the way, in light of what happened between them, but oh well, forgive me, Bill, or Melinda. Forgive me, Melinda, actually. Where do you put the email in here? Do you see the email?
Email type. It's in the middle, right?
Right here. Okay. All right. So here's a second donor with the same email. Okay. And it says create a new donor. Yes. So now we have two donors with the same email. Okay, that's fine. And we want to make sure that that gift that we're going to give is going to go to Melinda and not to Bill. Okay. Or attribute it to Melinda, not to Bill. So let's go back here. I'm going to put Melinda, same email, different phone number, $10 million, because he doesn't deserve it. I'm such a comedian, aren't I? All right, submit. We're gonna run this. I screwed up somewhere. All right, where did I screw up? The number selected values did not match the number selected keys. Okay, so I screwed up somewhere. So this worked here, but if I open it up in here, okay, so here we got an error here. You see this? It said Jotform submission ID. The number of selected values is somehow it gave me the number of selected values did not match the number of selected keys. Key group or 1018, 1019. Is it the same Jotform submission ID? 356. The subroutine 356. Save donor ID, get donor by email, found unique donor. Oh no, it came back. Right, it came back and found more than one donors. Oh, I think I need to replace that automation, that action. Sorry, I missed that. Right, so it came back with more than one donors. I think get donor by email returns all available donor fields for the specified email address. No errors if a donor is not found. The emitted donor ID will be empty. Okay, so it doesn't give me, okay, so I think the sample I was using was an old version of this where it would give me an error if I found more than one email, but the updated version actually returns all of them. So you just have to make a little change. So, and I think that's what it is. Let me see. DonorPerfect. Get donor by email. Right. So it returns them all. So what we want to do then is, okay, well, let's do it. We'll spend a little more time. And for those of you who had to leave, you had to leave and you can watch the recording. I'll spend another 3 minutes on this. So what I can do is I can count how many donors were returned as opposed to found as looking for an error. Okay, it's just that we enhanced that action and I had forgotten. So here I could just say count. So let me just come here and say count. Look for the, so here I'm gonna count. So count array elements. Okay. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to say, what is the array? Well, the array is the donor ID, right? So now it's counting how many donors were returned. Okay. I'm going to change this. Instead of if the donor ID is not empty, I'm going to say if the total count, total array elements equals 1, that means it only found one donor. Anything else goes to the left. Okay, make sense so far? Found a unique donor. So now here it says, has it found more than 1 or has it found 0? Well, so here instead of looking for an error message, I'm going to look at the count. Total array is
More than
greater than 1. Okay, greater than 1. Okay, so look at the logic here. It says if it's just 1, it found a unique 1. If it's more than 1, it found more than 1, and anything else is less than 1, means it didn't find any. So this still works. Okay, so you see the change that I made here? Does it make sense?
Right.
So here, this counts how many were returned. Again, this used to issue an error, but we changed the action. Now we are able to return all of the donors with that email. Okay, so that should solve it. And if not,
don't you have to tell it which donor to use then? From the saved donor to found unique donor, is it only going to pass one donor ID along to the right?
You're right.
Boom!
You're right. God, you're good.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, you're getting good. You're getting good. You. Hey, who am I? Who am I? You're getting good. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So, right. So I'm not going to do it now, but the way to do it, you can't just map the donor ID anymore. What you want to do is you want to output the array to single field and then loop through it and just pick the first. Well, actually, no, you're wrong. You're not good. You're wrong.
What's going on here?
Wait. No, you're wrong because if there's only one, you just map to it anyway. So here, were you talking about there or were you talking about?
No, I was talking to the far right because that's where it errored. It had 2.
Right, but it's not going to go to the right if it has 2 because remember, it only goes to the right. It only found 1.
Oh, all right. Yep. Because it only found 1. It's only going to emit 1.
Pen, you need to retract the good job, Mark.
I don't get the $1 million now.
You don't.
I'm gonna let him keep it because it's Friday.
Okay. All right. Yeah, but no, but that's a good thought though. If you can't just map an array to a single field, so at some point you'd have to parse that out. But in this case, we only found 1, so I think we're good.
Fine.
All right, it's really time for happy hour, big time.
Yeah.
I don't know what time it is in your time zone, but it's like way past happy hour over here. And for me, happy hour on Friday is noon. So I'm just kidding. All right. So added count and it's happy hour. I don't recommend it doing this, but I'm doing it here. All right. So I'm going to actually retry the error. I think I can do this I think I can do this here. Let's do a retry. How beautiful. All right, so Melinda came here and moved down and says get donor by email. It counted how many people it found with that email. Okay, you see that, Mark? It returned 2. Okay, this condition says found unique donor. This condition said if is 2 equals 1. No, it's not, because this only goes to the right if it only found 1, right? So then it goes to the left And to the left, it says, did it find more than one? How do we know this? Is because 2 is greater than 1, right? Anything greater than 1 means it found multiple, okay? Then it says here, get donor email by first, last, and last name. Can I find Melinda Gates? Yes, there is only one. And there's only one Melinda Gates. And you know what? That is true. There is only one Melinda Gates in the world. You can tell I have a lot of respect for her. But anyway, here it returned Melinda. It saved a donor ID for Melinda. It outputted to the subroutine. And then it added the gift because he doesn't deserve it. We still need to fix that. Maybe next time I'll talk about reformatting stuff. Maybe we'll do that next time. But now if I go to Melinda, I have her $10 million gift. And with that, I think we're done. Any final thoughts? Did that all make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yes, that was great. Thank you, Fred.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the tough thing for these things is because we totally improvise them, is to try to time them so they go right about the hour and a half. And because
Sorry to interrupt you, Fred. A couple minutes ago, we did get a question from Ken.
Okay.
If you found 5, you would have to loop where more than one condition on true branch.
Right.
I don't know that question.
No, that's a really good question. Let me share my screen again. I do want to cover that, actually. That's a really good question. So what if you found 5, right? Well, in this particular thing that we've done, it counts, right? And I don't know if he asked before we added the count or after, but if he asked after, if it found 5, it's not going to go to the right because it only goes to the right if it only found 1. So then it would go here and then say, did it find more than 1? Yes. So it would then go here and then it would say, can I find one by first and last name? Right? If it found, so technically, if there was 2 Melinda Gates, we should probably add the count over here as well and do the same thing and say, did I find more than 1 Melinda Gates? Okay. But in our case, at least for this particular logic here, what we've done is we've said, if there is more than 1, then we check for first and last name. If we have a single hit on that, then we associate it. And if we don't, then we do something else. What I would recommend is, at least for this, is that if you have more than 1 with the first and last name in the email, is that you send an SMS or Slack or a human interaction message and say, hey, I'm finding 5 Melinda Gates. Can you merge them? And then we'll process it. This is what I would do. If you wanted to, this is donation, so it's not appropriate here, but if you wanted to somehow take action on those 5, right? Let's say you wanted to say, instead of a donation, you wanted to just add a note to say possible donation, right? As a gift. You could put a loop here and say, I'm going to loop to the array. So you can create a loop and then pick the ID and loop for all 5 and then take an action for all 5. And for all 5, you could add a note, say possible donation, possible donation, possible donation 5 times. Okay. It all depends what you want to do with your result. But the array and the count array is your friend when you have potentially multiple results. Does that make sense, kind of?
Ken said good explanation. Thanks, Ken, for asking questions.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
great.
All right, you guys, you have a wonderful weekend. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. And we'll see you.
Good job, Fred.
We'll see you next week. Okay.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.